Welcome to the Eastern Oregon University Sexual Harassment Prevention and Response Training. Thank you for your time today. Today we'll be talking about a variety of topics related to sexual harassment and responsible employee. But first I wanted to introduce the topic to you. Every year we have sexual harassment prevention and response training for the whole campus. It's like, every single year. Why do we have to have it so often? Well, in addition to being required by federal law under Title IX, we want to protect people. We want to help persons who have been harassed. And of course, harassment results in huge personal harm, but there's also an education reason for annual training. This means that training helps ensure a safe and respectful teamwork that powers EOU's purpose, which is student learning, of course. Across campus, we need to learn and be respectful of one another so that it creates a team that enables the student learning to happen across all of the colleges and the other parts of the campus where students live and continue their education. This safe and respectful teamwork and sexual harassment prevention and response fits right in with the values and principles of EOU, specifically altruism and integrity. These values ensure the delivery of education services here at EOU is congruent with the university and its principles. In the training that occurred on September 18th, 2017, there were two presenters for this training, Colleen Dune-Casio and myself, Chris McLaughlin. Today, I will be the only narrator on the training, and your patience is much appreciated. So, topics for today: review of civil rights, summary of the Title IX law and its standards, what is sexual harassment consists of, and how do we respond to it, and then we'll go into, lastly, the responsible person roles and duties. Overview of civil rights laws. Civil rights has a long history in the United States. Probably the most legendary act is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which included many parts, specifically as applied to public universities, Title VI, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin in any kind of program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Similarly, Title VII prohibits employment discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. And then the Rehabilitation Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability. Title IX refers to Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, which has a broad scope in preventing discrimination based on sex in education and education employment. In Oregon, we have similar laws. No discrimination or harassment on the grounds of race, color, sex, marital status, religion, national origin, age, sexual orientation, or disability is permitted in any educational programs, activities, or employment. Elaborating, Oregon also has civil rights that includes any act that unreasonably differentiates treatment, intended or unintended, or any act that is fair in form but discriminatory in operation, based on race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, national origin, marital status, age, or disability. Let's get into a bit more detail. What does Title IX say? It says no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or subject to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. And of course, we receive a lot of financial assistance from the federal government here at Eastern, and this title applies to us directly. Who is protected? All sexes and genders, students, faculty, and staff. And it includes just about every activity on campus, including the ones you see here, from recruitment all the way down to athletics and employment assistance. Let's have a little quiz. Answer true or false on these. Is sexual harassment on campus illegal if committed by supervisors, employees, students? Yes, that one might be a bit obvious, but yes, it's true. Well, what about visitors, vendors, and contractors, alumni? Yes, it applies to them too. Well, what about people who trespass onto the campus, instructors, or citizens just walking their pets as they walk across campus? Yes, it applies to them. Sexual harassment is illegal if it's committed on campus. It doesn't matter who is committing or who the victim is at any time. In other words, Title VII and Title IX protects students and employees. These two together prohibit discrimination based on sex or gender stereotyping if it interferes with a student's ability to participate or benefit from school programs or the employee's job. And this is regardless of the person's sex, gender, identity, or sexual orientation. And it's no matter where it occurs, or whether the perpetrator is a student, employee, or somebody that just happened to walk onto campus right then. Let's dig a little bit deeper into what is discrimination on the basis of sex. Well, of course, it has to be sexual or sex-based treatment. In other words, it's based on the person's sex and gender. It includes discrimination because of pregnancy and related medical conditions, and it includes gender stereotyping. So there are three particular types of sexual discrimination. One, intentional decisions. These are the ones that treat students or employees differently because of their sex. Here's some examples. Guidance counselors consistently tell male students about opportunities to take engineering classes, but they don't even mention that to female students. Or an instructor consistently calls on men more than women in business courses. Or the instructor consistently calls on women more than men in education courses. Or recruitment materials feature only women in childcare classes. These would seem innocuous, but they are examples of either of intentional decisions with some underlying assumption about sex or gender as they apply to the opportunities. The second kind is called disparate impact. And these are practices that don't explicitly or intentionally adversely affect men or women, but nonetheless harm them because significantly more members of one sex than the other are adversely affected by the impact of a policy or practice. For example, a college requires students to pass a strength test before allowing them to enroll in an advanced physical education course. Well, this might be advantageous to one sex or one gender than another. A college bases awards on students' awareness of emotional feelings. A college refers students for internships based on psychological tests that measure ambition and drive. Well, these are the things, if they're awarded to more men than women just because of the nature of their, quote, uniform or fair criteria, then it's disparate impact. It's an inadvertent, unintentional discrimination. And these are also covered under both Title VII and Title IX here at Eastern. Thirdly, what is discrimination? It's also retaliation. And this is common. Often what we think of in terms of sexual discrimination involves retaliation. And this is defined as adverse action taken against an individual because that person engaged in a protected act. Let's talk about some examples of this. For employees, it can include reduction in pay, material change in job duties, harassment on the job, favoritism, or even demotion or termination. For students, here are the more common ones: suspension, reduction in grades, denial of permission to go in places, and just general harassment in the class or on the playing field. Retaliation is sexual discrimination, and it's often probably the type that's often hidden the most, either overtly hidden or inadvertently hidden because people don't even realize that they do it or they justify it before they embark on that retaliation. They think it's correct based on their own values, rather than what's right under the law and what's right under Eastern policies. Special rules apply to athletics. There are 3 requirements. Male and female students have equal opportunities to participate. Scholarship dollars are allocated equitably. And male and female athletes are treated fairly in all aspects of athletics. Another special rule is pregnancy. Basically, colleges may not discriminate based on pregnancy, childbirth, false pregnancy, termination of pregnancy, or recovery from pregnancy. There's no aspect of pregnancy that is accepted. Must treat students affected by pregnancy and related medical conditions the same as everybody else that has a temporary disability. And the college must allow pregnant students a leave of absence and reinstate them upon their return. So pregnancy is protected as if the student had never been pregnant in terms of being able to be excused from everything from assignments to being reinstated after their pregnancy is over and they've recovered. Let's talk about a case here. I'm going to let you read this case and then give you some options to choose from. So, if you were the instructor, how would you respond? No makeup test? It's just illegal discrimination to make an exception. Would you allow a makeup test because not allowing it could illegally discriminate against the pregnant students? Or no makeup test. Look, professors' test policies are not subject to law. Well, if you chose the second one, you're correct. This is a classic situation where uniformity, a very uniform policy, is discriminatory. A couple more special rules. One is about affirmative action. And affirmative action is, the term means that an organization reaches out and affirmatively recruits and communicates and tries to draw the attention of students or prospective employees into the organization. It is not preferences or quotas or anything like that. It's designed to ensure equal access to educational and employment opportunities and to overcome barriers that have limited the participation of women and minorities in the past. A couple of examples: purposeful outreach and recruitment to reach protected classes, collecting data on enrollment, retention and graduation, and examining for potential shortfalls, evaluating admission processes to ensure criteria doesn't inadvertently exclude protected classes, and taking race or gender into account in employment-related decisions when it's part of affirmative action plan. All right, let's change gear a little bit and get into recognizing and responding to sexual harassment. Again, a bit of a review. Sexual harassment includes sexual harassment directly, gender-based harassment, and sexual orientation-based harassment. Sexual harassment is conduct of a sexual nature that is unwanted and unwelcome and that interferes with a student's right to learn, study, work, achieve, or participate in their college activities, or an employee's right to equal treatment involving employment matters. Sexual harassment can be perpetrated by pretty much anybody, teacher, staff, student, or third party, and it has to be directed or can be directed by one type of sex or gender at another, or at the same type of sex or gender. It doesn't matter. As long as this harassment is based on sex. And harassment, as you could probably figure out, harassment can happen anywhere. Classrooms, field trips, residence halls, and more these days, it happens via social media and email. So that whole electronic realm, you might say, is included under protection of Title IX and Title VII. Unlawful harassment can cause harm in a lot of different ways. Of course, we have the physical and emotional injury to victims and the people who care and love them. We have disruptions of education and careers. But we also have a lot of damage to EOU's ability to function properly and to our values. There's a legal liability for EOU, money that could have been used for better purposes. And it creates a lot of dysfunction in communities and society at large. There are two general types of sexual harassment. In other words, there are lots of different kinds of sexual harassment, but they fall into two general categories. The first one is called quid pro quo, which means this for that. These are tangible benefits or penalties that are conditioned on an individual's submission to or failure to submit to requests for sexual favors. This is probably a familiar one to you, in that a lot of cases happen around quid pro quo. The second one is hostile environment. That's basically harassment that does not result in a tangible benefit or penalty, but that it is sufficiently severe and pervasive to establish a hostile work environment that limits the victim's ability to participate in classes, activities, anything to do with their education or their employment. Let's have a little quiz here, little case study number 2. Go ahead and read this, and we'll review the possible answers. All right. So the dean learns about this situation, and what should he do? Nothing, since Professor Zatter isn't really harassing Jensen. In fact, he should take advantage of her invitations. That's an unusual one. Secondly, report the situation to the Title IX coordinator, or just tell Jensen to continue to avoid one-on-one situations. Well, of course, the answer is report the situation. This is a serious quid pro quo violation, where it appears that for a little bit of affection, Zatter can give out some extra grades and extra credits, which, of course, that is completely off limits. Let's talk about examples of hostile environment harassment. There's the more direct physical contact type, which usually consists of unwelcome sexual advances, unwanted hugs, touches, or kisses, pretty much any physical contact. And secondly, there's a lot of hostile environment that can be created from non-physical contact. These come in 4 different varieties: sexually suggestive or lewd remarks, derogatory jokes, hey, did you hear the one about ooh hoo hoo? Sexually derogatory or pornographic posters, cartoons, or other images, and sexual gestures. These are all forms of hostile environment in context of sexual harassment. How can you tell when a hostile environment has been created? Well, you begin by assessing several factors. 1, the severity of the conduct, the frequency of the conduct, the relationship and ages of the harasser and victim, and what often people don't like to admit, but it's a huge factor, and that is the impact on the victim, both subjective and objective. And victim impact is very important and a huge vital component of hostile environments. How can you tell if advances are unwelcome? Well, put yourself in the position of the alleged harasser and ask, would you want your behavior to appear on the evening news? Is there a difference in status or power between you and the other person? Would you behave the same way if a trusted family member were standing next to you? Would you want someone else to act this way toward your own children or significant other? Of course, the answer to all these would be no if it's unwelcome, but these are good little sort of rules of thumb to keep in mind. Another probably one of the more harmful acts that are pretty common in sexual harassment is relationship violence. Of course, we hear a lot about this throughout society, and it's very applicable to life here on campus as well. And this is relationship violence is when one partner hurts or tries to control or dominate the other partner. It is abusive behavior. It takes a variety of forms, and it's not just always physical. But the physical aspect of this is causing bodily harm, that's obvious. It can be emotional impacts, manipulating someone with guilt or fear, or isolating them. It can be technological, sending unwanted messages via text, email, social media, spying or tracking someone through computer tracking software. You can download this stuff really easily and start to snoop on people. That's a form of violence. It can also be just straightaway verbal, belittling, humiliating, insulting, or spreading rumors about somebody. Another case. Go ahead and read this one about Bailey, and we'll talk about the options for answering. All right. Question. Are there signs of an abusive relationship in this incident? Well, no. The woman apologized. The man took no offense. And they left holding hands. No, there's nothing there. Or unsure. Maybe more information is needed via investigation. Or yes, because Bailey witnessed physical abuse. Well, one answer is unsure. And an investigation is indeed needed. But a lot of people thought the final answer, yes, because Bailey witnessed physical abuse, was also a valid answer here, and that's true, because the question is, are there signs of an abusive relationship? So either answer would be fine. The point is that if you witness something like this, you needed to report it to the Title IX coordinator. Sexual violence, sexual harassment. Yes, sexual violence is sexual harassment. And sexual violence includes different sex and same-sex sexual violence. Rape, sexual assault, sexual battery, sexual abuse, sexual coercion, and associated retaliations are all violence, and they're not permitted. Well, let's say you run into a situation. What should you do? Well, take these steps to help prevent harassment to begin with. Remain alert for the signs of unlawful harassing behavior around you. Advise others to avoid unlawful harassment. Don't wait for a complaint. When it's safe to step in to prevent unlawful harassment, do so. Report it, of course, and cooperate in the investigations. And then look for cues in the environment where sexual harassment has a higher potential to be occurring. There are quite a few of these. Changes in students' level of participation in class, intoxication at gatherings. That's a big one. In my experience investigating cases over many, many years, intoxication or drugs are involved in the vast majority of situations. So avoid exercise a lot of prudence and temperance when you're involved with campus activities. Number 3, student or employee avoidance of supervisor, teacher, coworker, other students. Often you'll see people shying away, and this could be, something is underlying that, and hopefully it's not sexual harassment, but that's a common response. Pervasive display of sexually explicit or graphic material. Some people just aren't sensitized to how offensive that is and what a hostile environment it can create. So you'd want to address that or at least report it. 5, sexually explicit or gender-based jokes at faculty or staff gathering places. There are more. Appearance of sexual graffiti on desks, buildings, etc. 7, presence of cliques or gangs that may promote and urge people from a peer pressure standpoint to be sexually harassing others. On field trip incidents involving complaints of verbal or physical abuse. Of course, we've talked about social media, email, texting, Instagram, etc. That's an extremely common one these days. People feel as if they're anonymous when they're really not. And recurring disciplinary problems. For instance, the same student have a pattern of for having fun and bothering students. Again, a situation that probably needs some education and training and how it affects other people. Quiz time. Answer true or false to these questions. Sexual harassment must happen more than once to be considered actionable. That would be a false. One incident can be considered sexual harassment. And this is particularly true in quid pro quo situations like you saw with Professor Zatter. Even if she only sent the student a message once, that could, and if it was validated, would constitute sexual harassment. Question 2. Consensual sexual relationship between two people can't ever be deemed sexual harassment. Well, that would be false as well. The issue is not one of consent. The issue is whether the advances are welcome or not. Let's do a couple more. Let's try a couple more questions. If you believe you have been sexually harassed, you have to personally confront the harasser and give him or her a chance to stop before reporting the incident. No, that's false too. There is no such requirement. And this is particularly the case with a quid pro quo situation. For instance, Professor Zatter, where it looked like she was offering extra grade credit for some affection. That would be something you'd want to report without having to personally confront the professor about it. That's just fine. The last question. You make a sexually charged joke at work. Your coworkers all seem to laugh and enjoy that humor. This does not constitute sexual harassment since it is not unwelcome conduct. Well, we're not sure. The test for harassment has two components: the victim's subjective standard and, number 2, what a reasonable person would consider offensive or not. So you could have a group of people that thought a joke was just fine, but if it was extremely lewd, then a reasonable person would conclude that it's extremely lewd. Then that would be sexual harassment, whether or not anybody in the group thought it was unwelcome. Why might you hesitate to report harassment? Well, it's uncomfortable to begin with, but there's a lot of fear involved too. I mean, oftentimes you don't know the people well enough, and there's a lot of fear of retaliation, embarrassment, career damage, job loss, being labeled a troublemaker, or just being ostracized because you're the only one with a conscience in the room. Well, if you're waiting for the right time, it's now when it comes to sexual harassment. If you have any doubts or any qualms about whether it is or not, just report it. There's not a big burden on you. Once you do, you're not obligated to carry out an investigation or anything like this. But there are other situations too. Maybe you were told to ignore it. Maybe you were told that you're overreacting. You were told that the victim likes the attention, or it's the victim's fault. Or perhaps you're concerned about the reactions of other people, or you're just simply unaware of the victim's rights and laws. Well, these are all invalid reasons for not reporting. Get up your courage and do the right thing in terms of protecting people and maintaining the integrity of the university. Here are some things not to say, as in wrong way, go back. When responding to an incident, be careful to avoid saying, well, just ignore it. He puts his arms around everyone. Why can't you learn to accept a compliment? You must have wanted it, otherwise you would have told him no. That's how they do things where he comes from. It's a joke. Chill. I know he didn't mean anything like that. It's your fault for dressing so provocatively. It's time you grow up and learn to handle these things. These are all invalid statements. None of these are excuses or reasons that excuse sexual harassment in any sense. So what is an effective response if you are directly told of harassment by the victim? First of all, of course, take it seriously. And then you want to be sensitive to the person. They may be, having emotional impact, if not physical impact. But it's important to understand that you can keep information private, but there are certain aspects under the law that require information to be revealed, to be disclosed. And so you cannot keep it completely confidential all the time. You have an obligation to report the names of persons in the incident, as well as the nature of the misconduct, to the Title IX coordinator. You can help people out by saying they can go to the police, and you can help them do that if you'd like, that they can talk to a confidential resource, which on campus here for students would be the Student Counseling Center. If they want to talk with you, yes, of course, listen and avoid judgment, avoid all those previous wrong way, go back words. And then reinforce the situation that by saying that EOU prohibits all this retaliation and sexual harassment. Write down the incident details so you don't forget, and then, of course, report the incident to the Title IX coordinator promptly. What's an effective response? If you just hear about harassment that might have happened last week, last year, take it seriously. Listen and sympathize with the others, again, but don't judge and try to figure out if it was right or wrong. Just report it. If there's any immediate harm going on, try to take care of that by calling the police or taking steps to protect additional physical harm if that's safe for you. Of course, report the incident, don't delay, and document the incident just like you would otherwise. When you report it, what will the EOU Title IX coordinator do? Well, they're going to conduct a prompt and thorough investigation. They're going to make sure no retaliation happens. They're going to protect confidentiality to all extent possible. They're going to take immediate necessaries to prevent more sexual harassment from happening. And they're going to take effective and appropriate remedial action to prevent it from ever happening again. What kind of remedial actions are we talking about here? Actions that reasonably calculated to end the harassment and prevent its reoccurrence. Common examples: separating the harasser from the victim, disciplining harassers, providing additional training and education on what sexual harassment is, changing procedures, and where harassment has been confirmed through a thorough investigation, reversing the effects of that harassment, such as removing negative grades or evaluations, or allowing students to retake a test or even retake the entire class. Where can you get help? Well, this is a new poster that's going to be or has already been posted throughout the EOU campus. It tells you exactly where the employee and student resources are and where additional student resources are. Where can you get help? This handout is available from Student Affairs, from the Title IX coordinator, and from the Human Resources Office, and other places around campus. It describes in detail where the campus resources are, both confidential resources and non-confidential resources. Note that the Counseling Center is for students only, as is the Student Health Center. And then it also lists off-campus resources, such as Shelter from the Storm and the Sexual Assault Response Team. Pick one of these up. To file a complaint directly or for technical assistance, contact Colleen Dune-Cassio, Title IX coordinator. Here's her information. And you can do so anonymously by going online and reporting the incident via the EOU Security Services webpage. You just click on that, and it'll ask basic information, and this will be directly delivered to the Title IX coordinator. The last chapter today addresses what is known as a responsible person. And this is in context of sexual harassment. Let's get into the details of what that means. Who is a responsible person, first of all? Around campus, it's everybody. It's all employees are responsible persons. What does that entail? Well, first of all, it entails how you feel about it. Bystanders are often unsure themselves as responders. And what we're talking about here is responding to sexual harassment incidents. And this goes from witnessing something to hearing about something. If sexual harassment comes up, then you need to report it. That's what responsible person is. But sometimes it's hard to do that. Perhaps you're unclear about whether intervention is needed or welcome, or a lack of awareness of what's going on allows the sexual misconduct to continue. So here are 4 steps. First, assume the role of a responsible person, meaning you have the law and the policy and the obligation to proceed and address the situation. Notice what's going on as a person who is responsible. Thirdly, determine if the incident is a problem and must be reported, perhaps even an emergency. And remember that concern for confidentiality is an invalid reason to not report. A lot of people are confused, or they just want to maintain a certain level of privacy in these incidents. And they say, look, I don't want anybody to get hurt, or I don't want you to do anything about it. I don't want you to tell anybody. But however, once you learn about it, then you have to report it. 4, possess the skills to intervene if necessary. Make an intervention safe, early, and effective. And this type of training is available here at EOU. Continuing, as a responsible person, you acknowledge the victim. It is important that you listen, you're present to them, you avoid judgment, and you do not blame the person for what happened. This is an important step because oftentimes it seems obvious. Maybe the victim had too much to drink, or they were wearing something really sexy, or that whatever the situation, you could say, you might be thinking to yourself, wow, I'd never do that. Well, don't communicate that. Just avoid that judgment, withhold that judgment. It's unlikely you know all the facts, and even if you did, placing the blame on the victim is simply not appropriate at this stage, if it ever is. If the person prefers no action be taken at that time, he or she should be informed that his or her preference will be shared with the Title IX coordinator. So even though as a responsible person you have to report these incidents, the Title IX coordinator will determine what the necessary course of action needs to happen. Remember, in these situations, there are a lot of confused emotions. The person may feel a variety of confusing emotions like panic, helplessness, guilt, shame, very common, numbness or denial. Sometimes a person's very emotionless. They're flat. They're like almost in shock, and they very well may be after an incident of sexual misconduct. Other people are very excited and they're crying hysterically. Whatever the situation, recognize that they're probably not thinking straight, and there's a lot going on. This is a definite assault, and just try to keep the situation calm, and again, go back to being present for them and listening to them. And lastly, avoid statements that indicate you do not believe them, and statements about possible outcomes. Don't be promising anything, because it's up to the Title IX coordinator to figure out what happened and what to do after an investigation is complete. This is another little card that, as a responsible person, is designed to allow you to just keep it on your person all the time. It fits very easily into a wallet or a purse. And it's a responsible employee script, and it gives you the sample steps that you should follow if you encounter a situation. Now, I've been HR director for many, many years, and I carry this little card around with me because when I'm in a situation where a sexual assault or sexual harassment may have happened, I don't want to be thinking about gee, what's next? I just pull this card out, I cover the bases, and this way I can be present to people and listen a lot better and not be worrying about if I left some step out. So go ahead and read through this a minute. I'll give you a minute to read, especially the one on the left. You can see that script on the left has all the ingredients we've been talking about. And once you complete this training, please come by either the Student Affairs office or the Human Resources office to pick up your card, so you can have it on you in case something were to happen. So I appreciate your attention and your time today. I'm sorry you didn't make the training on September 18th. It was quite a bit more animated and entertaining. It's always good to be in training with your coworkers and other people who really care about preventing sexual harassment and properly responding to it. So just remember, harassment results in huge personal harm. It needs to be prevented. Victims need to be helped, and we need to make teamwork happen in order for students to learn correctly and deliver educational services here. You are the solution, not you alone, you meaning us together. We are the solution to preventing sexual harassment and, when it does happen, responding to it effectively. So again, thank you for your time today. If you have any questions, please feel free to call me, Chris McLaughlin, in the Human Resources Department, or Colleen Dunn-Cassio in Student Affairs.